Right saves lives.
Yeah.
So I just want you to remember this too, Rob, that what you do here every day, I know you work hard, man, and I know it can be stressful, but I want you to remember that at the end of the day, you are literally helping save lives from the tyrants by shedding light on the truth here of what's happening.
Well, and that's what makes it worth it, and I'm happy to do it because I hate injustice, and I hate when bullies pick on the underdog.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I wasn't raised that way to take advantage of people, and I hate to see it happen, and it really, really pisses me off.
Well, me too. And just to add, I raise backyard chickens. All right, I've got goats. Yeah, clearly, right. Some kind of weird terrorist. If they can do this to him, they could do it to me.
You're next.
They could do it to you or your family. Anybody around Austin, anybody in Texas who's a farmer, they could just declare your property to be a nuisance zone, and they could come literally shoot your livestock and arrest you or even shoot you.
And what gets me is these people are not producers. They're not makers of things. They are these petty little tattletale miscreants. You know, it reminds me of the people when you were in school who were writing names on the board. You know, they were the first one to stand up and go, "Oh, I'll write your name on the board. Right. I'm good. I'm with the system."
Nazi enforcers.
It's sick. Let's move on to one of our favorite whipping boys, Monsanto, who's going to sue the entire state of Vermont just because, well, they want to have a right to know genetically engineered food act, and that's what it's H722. And they're going, apparently Monsanto's threatening to sue the state of Vermont. What can you tell us on this?
Well, Monsanto is losing this war so badly about the right to know what's in your food that state after state has been putting forth legislation that would allow parents and consumers, all of us, to just know what's in our food, to be able to make an informed decision about whether we want to buy GMO food or non-GMO food. Monsanto sees that as the end of their entire GMO business, which is probably an accurate assessment. So they're in desperation mode now, threatening and intimidating an entire state in this case, and California is probably going to be next because there's a petition effort there to label GMOs. They're trying to intimidate the entire state into saying that if you dare allow this law to be put into action and allow consumers to be informed of what's in their food, then we're going to drag your state through the courts and cost you hundreds of millions of dollars in court fees, and your state can't afford that. So this is another case of corporate bullying of a state that's trying to simply allow its consumers to be informed.
Now, could a state like Vermont say, you know what, we're not going to allow Monsanto products in our state? Could they ban those products?
Absolutely, they could.
Just say, you know, no weed killer, no Roundup. We don't want this crap in here, and we're going to blockade you like the Trade Federation and Star Wars if you don't, you know, capitulate.
But the federal government would then probably intervene, and they would misquote the Commerce Clause of the Constitution.
Oh, of course.
And actually, the original intent of the Commerce Clause was to make sure that states could not erect illegal tariffs against interstate trade. So that might actually be one of the only appropriate uses if it were in a different context. But you can bet the federal government would cite the Commerce Clause to try to intervene and allow Monsanto to keep selling its products in the state.
And, you know, that, after listening to what I just said, that might sound like a call, you know, for like tyranny of the state. But, you know, the states are allowed to assert their rights. And if they're being sued by these companies, that the research is out there. This stuff is not good for us. It's not. And they hide the research. They try to hide anything that lets people know and make an informed choice.
Well, think about this. GMOs are the only product that I can think of that is only successfully sold because consumers don't know they're buying it.
That's it.
It is sold entirely on deception, disinformation, and sweeping it under the rug, so to speak. If foods were honestly and accurately labeled with their GMO content, 95% of consumers would avoid buying them.
Right.
And that would be the end of the GMO industry, which is what we need.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we don't need these companies preying on us anymore with and it's not even that the GMOs are any better. They're not. They take more pesticide, which is just poisoning us more, or they have all these reproductive problems, which is most likely intentional.
Sure. Well, Monsanto is a lot like Obama, where Monsanto made a lot of campaign promises just like Obama made and then violated every single one of them. Well, Monsanto's so-called campaign promises were that these seeds would increase production, you would have to use less pesticide, you know, increase yields, better nutrition, and so on. The opposite has been the case. Right. So just as Obama has said, let's have more secret prisons, let's sign the NDAA, let's raid medical marijuana clinics in California.
Let's take over farms if we want.
Exactly. Monsanto, the facts have turned out that the crop yields are lower, the soil is killed off and dead, crops cannot even grow very well after 5 years, the super weeds are taking over, you have to use more pesticides, more chemicals, which is killing the rivers and the streams downstream. It's a freaking ecological nightmare. Yeah, of course. It cross-pollinates, it ruins the genetic code of the agricultural industry in America. We're talking about a genetic assault on the future of America's agriculture.
It's happening now. It's definitely happening now, and now it's coming after, and it's killing the bees. I mean, they're finally, after many years of probably lackluster study, they're finally saying, well, you know what, it is chlorothalonide. How do you say that again?
Well, it's in a class called neonicotinoids is the class, and that's just one example, one chemical in that class of chemical pesticides.
Bayer.
Yep, by Bayer. Oh, a loving Bayer.
Yeah, who sold tainted HIV blood to the rest of the world that they exported here from the United States.
Former chairperson of Bayer served time in prison after the Nuremberg trials for war crimes. That's a piece of history that people don't really tend to acknowledge, but that's part of Bayer's history as well.
And so how is it actually killing the bees? What is it doing to them? Is it getting them to where they're not knowing where their colony is, or?
Definitely. Understand, these synthetic chemicals, these are designed to attack the nervous systems of insects. That's their killing mechanism. When the honeybees are exposed to them, which is usually at low concentrations, low levels, it doesn't necessarily kill the honeybees. What it does is it disrupts their normal neurological function, which is a very complex, fragile system of navigation that actually tunes in to many environmental cues, sunlight, the angle of the sun, maybe even the Earth's magnetic fields. We don't even know if that's part of it as well. But it's a very delicate computer that's in the honeybees' little brains. And when that computer is disrupted by these chemicals, then it throws off their navigation. They can't find their way back to the flower. They can't even find their way back to the hive. They get lost. They die. The colony collapses, and then the food supply begins to collapse. That's what we're facing now as the honeybees collapse.
Yeah, I shot this a couple years ago on the Greenbelt. Go back to that footage, and it's a honeybee I was touching it. I was trying to get it to move. It was just
lost.
Not interested in doing anything but laying there.
Well, think about it. If the honeybees get lost, the human species may be lost because our food supply ends.
We can't pollinate. That's one thing we can't do. We can try, but
there are, greenhouse owners who do it all by hand.
Right.
Talk about a labor-intensive business. The honeybees, they work for us for free.
Yeah.
You can't replace that.
There was a cost at one time. How much was that where they said, this is how much it would cost to do what the honeybees are doing for nothing?
Probably hundreds of billions of dollars a year globally. There are honeybee owners who will rent out their hives, for pollination. That's been a traditional activity that you see in agriculture. But now I've seen some American farmers have to bring in bees from places like Australia because that's where the colonies aren't yet collapsing. So that, you can imagine how hugely expensive that is to airship honeybees from another continent to pollinate your food in America.
Bees on a plane. Very interesting.
Yeah, right.
Well, let's move on to, SSRIs. They're, we had just had in Austin, a 24-year-old Brandon Daniel was on Xanax and tequila and went to Home Depot and then, it was Walmart and killed a cop.
Yeah.
And it's just one of the many things that happens with these people taking on these SSRIs. And, this is a very growing trend. We got the active duty troops on them. We had the guy who went on the Afghan murder spree. Now he was being put on one of was this an amnesic drug he was on?
Yeah, he was on a combination.
Okay.
They do painkillers, they do sleep drugs, they do the memory hole drugs that they put soldiers on so they don't remember the trauma that they went through. Instead of treating it, just cover it up.
Right.
You remember comedian Phil Hartman? He used to be on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
He was a victim of a murder-suicide.
On this?
She was on the antidepressant drugs. Yeah. Wow. You go back to Columbine High School shootings. Obviously, the antidepressants, the SSRIs in that case. You got to look.
90% of the shooters, I think.
Oh yeah, it's a huge number. And we have an epidemic of the psychiatric drugging of U.S. soldiers, as this graphic is showing. This is one that we put together. And
these are really good. I like these graphics.
Thanks, man. We're just trying to keep up with INFOWARS. There we go. Look at what it causes: suicides, accidents, violence, and drug addiction. The soldiers are given a 180-day supply of all these psychotropic drugs and then sent out into the field with all these drugs in their hands. and they barter them, they trade them, they take too much, they lose them, they have withdrawals. The most dangerous thing that you can do with these drugs is quit them cold turkey.
Right.
That's what causes a violent outbreak episode. So for anyone watching who wants to get off of these drugs, make sure you work with your physician or naturopath. Do it slowly, gradually over time. Don't quit cold turkey, or you may just snap and end up shooting somebody or shooting your own family member, because these drugs cause you to dissociate from reality. So that young man who shot a police officer in Austin, he may not have even known what he was doing. He may have thought in his mind that he was playing a video game, an Xbox game, that involved a Walmart and some bad guys with guns, and he just thought he was playing a game. And later, he might have realized what actually happened, but at that moment in his mind, he may not at all have been guilty of pulling that trigger and committing that crime.
God, I mean, it's just, and this is all these are examples of the system and the lordships above us trying to come out with these panaceas. It's like, oh, here, just take this, just do this. We're going to help you. All this is here to help you. And it's not. It's always these so-called good intentions, which are usually motivated by profits and stealing from people.
This is clearly motivated by profit, the psych drugging of soldiers and children and adults in America. Yeah. And the real sad part about it, Rob, is that the scientific studies show that these antidepressants work no better than placebo. So there's absolutely no benefit to them compared to just taking a sugar pill, let's say, or an olive oil pill. So the scientific fraud that pushes the pills, and then there's profit fraud that takes place, and then the damage that the pills cause, such as the shooting of this police officer in Austin, who pays for that? Does the drug company pay for that? No. Of course not.
They're never at fault at all for creating this stuff. Just like the vaccines, they can't be at fault for giving kids autism. I was looking, I actually had my mom send me these pictures, and I didn't bring in my phone with me, but from this edition of National Geographic, they had a study with twins. And there's a graph for identical and fraternal twins, and identical twins are more susceptible. If one gets autism, the other one is more likely to get it too. And my wife brought this up because we're always having the vaccine debate at my house.
Oh, really?
Let me tell you.
That must be fun.
And I fight it. I fight it very hardcore. And she came up and showed me this. She goes, well, what does this mean? How come the fraternal twins don't get it? And I said, well, identical twins come from the same genetic makeup, the same egg. And whereas you got fraternal twins, it's two different eggs. So you have two different genetic makeups. So they're not as susceptible. Whereas, if you look across the board, the identical twins are more susceptible to alcoholism if one has the other get it, learning disabilities, autism. And that's just because they come from the same genetic makeup. So they're probably getting the same other environmental factors that would trigger that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's true. There is some genetic susceptibility to the causes of autism, which most undoubtedly include vaccine adjuvants, the chemicals. But Alex actually hit on something huge the other day that I don't think has even been highlighted enough, which is that there's a whole new wave of vaccines that aren't even vaccines. They're not working on the antibody theory of immune response. They are, in fact, nanotechnology brain-eating injections. They're chemical lobotomies, but they call them vaccines.
Right.
So autism may be just the earliest example in our society of an injection with a chemical that eats part of your brain or disables part of your neurology. Sure. And in the future, they're going to target adults like you and me.
Sure.
People who speak out, oh, you have a disorder.
People who think about conspiracies, hey, you probably have a disorder.
Clearly. Well, they have it named. It's obedience defiance disorder, ODD. Right. That's already in the DSM of the psychiatric manual.
Oh, yeah. Restless leg syndrome.
Right.
Need a vaccine. There's always going to be something to treat people. Mike, it's always a pleasure to have you in here. Thanks a lot for coming, and I'm sure you'll be back many more times, and it's great having you here.